A terrible crime happened in the city of Philadelphia, and it has shocked all its residents. Late in the evening, two robbers, Rupert Ems and Clarence Darby, broke into the house of a man called Clyde Shelton.
You can't fight fate.
They told and tied up the owner of the house, wounded him, and then, right before his eyes, brutally killed his wife and little daughter. The criminals were quickly caught and brought to trial. Their case was given to the young and promising assistant prosecutor called Nick. Just before the trial, Nick meets with Clyde, who is completely heartbroken. The lawyer tells him the bad news. The prosecution doesn't have enough rock-hard evidence to convict both culprits. Therefore, the prosecutor's office has made a deal with Darby, the one who uttered that ominous phrase.
You can't fight fate.
Darby agrees to testify against his partner, Ems, and in exchange, his prison term will be significantly reduced.
He serves, what, 5 years?
Hearing this, Clyde begins to beg Nick not to make a deal with the killer of his family. He asks to do everything possible to ensure that both criminals will receive the severe and deserved punishment. However, Nick replies that this is how the legal system works, and it is impossible to cancel an agreement that has already been reached.
Please don't make it do this, man. He's almost sure
The deal is done.
As a result, the court passes the following sentence. Rupert Ems is sentenced to death, and the main instigator and killer, Clarence Darby, will spend only 3 years in jail. Darby spitefully shakes Nick's hand. Seeing this from afar, Clyde starts feeling bitter disappointment and grievance. 10 years later, Nick comes to work as usual, and together with his assistant Sarah Lowell, goes to attend Rupert Ems's execution. For Sarah, this is the first time, that's why she is very nervous. In order to calm her down, Nick says that after an injection with a special drug, a person simply falls asleep without feeling pain. But this time, everything goes horribly wrong. When the sentence is carried out, Ems dies in terrible agony. His last words,
Romance died.
also sound strange. Nick becomes incredibly worried and assumes that someone could have deliberately damaged the execution apparatus. Soon this idea is confirmed. He sees an empty IV bag with the words,
Can't fight fate.
scrawled on it. Nick instantly remembers that Clarence Darby said the same words in the courtroom 10 years back.
I mean, you can't fight fate, right?
Realizing that something terrible is going on, Nick and a group of officers immediately go to arrest Darby. Meanwhile, Darby himself, being carefree and having fun at home, receives a mysterious phone call. An unknown anonymous voice warns him that the police are already on their way to his house. A secret assistant, who appears out of nowhere like a guardian angel, orders Darby to run across the rooftops. He also tells the criminal that there is a police car parked nearby on the street and that its driver is knocked senseless inside. Without a second thought, Darby rushes to follow the instructions, climbs onto the roof, goes down to the designated place, and finds the car. He jumps into the passenger seat, and right there, a gun is pointed at the cop's temple. Rudely orders him to leave. Overjoyed at being saved, Darby even praises his savior. "Bravo, Hitch!" and speeds off. Soon they find themselves in a wasteland. Here, the policeman gets out of the car and does something unexpected. He takes off his wig and sunglasses, which hide Clyde Shelton's face. Seeing his sworn enemy, Darby pulls the trigger of the gun to shoot him. But as soon as he touches the trigger, sharp needles go out of its handle with a click and stick into his palm. With triumph in his voice, Clyde tells the paralyzed criminal that he has just injected him with a special strong poison, tetrodotoxin.
In other words,
You can't move, but you feel everything.
This poison does not damage the nervous system, but completely immobilizes the body, leaving the victim with only one terrible option, the ability to feel all the pain. Late in the evening, Clyde brings the immobilized and scared to death Darby to an abandoned warehouse. There, slowly and cold-bloodedly, he begins to prepare him for the massacre. He puts tourniquets so that Darby will not bleed out prematurely and avoid suffering. Then Clyde injects him with adrenaline, which should prevent the killer from losing consciousness and allow him to remain clear-minded. Due to this, Darby can see and understand everything. Clyde also hangs a large mirror and a photo of his killed family right in front of him.
you hear that? Your heart is beating so fast. No, me too.
Now Clarence can watch everything what is happening to him, and at the same time see the faces of those he once killed.
It'll be the last thing you ever see.
Clyde clearly enjoys taking revenge on the killer of his family. He even films the entire process on a video camera. The next day, the police finds Clarence Darby's mutilated body. Investigators quickly realize that the only person who has a strong motive for such a cruel revenge is Clyde Shelton. That same day, he is arrested and taken to the police station. However, during the interrogation, the investigation faces a serious problem. There is no direct and irrefutable evidence of Clyde's guilt.
Nick, unless you have any hard evidence, then why are we even here?
Mere assumptions about the motive are not enough to charge him and send to jail. Assistant Prosecutor Nick asks the arrested man a series of simple and direct questions, hoping to expose him. But Clyde answers evasively and cautiously, without giving any specific confessions. In the end, satisfied that at least he has carried out all the necessary procedures, Nick is about to leave the interrogation room when Clyde Shelton calmly tells him that it will be impossible to prove his guilt in court. He begins to accuse the prosecutor himself of negligence and unprofessionalism. Clyde recalls that during the interrogation, he did not directly confess to the murders of Ems and Darby.
Think back, what did I say? That I wanted to kill Clarence Darby? Yeah, sure, what father wouldn't?
He only said that he wanted them dead and many times imagined himself inflicting punishment against them, and these are just thoughts that do not constitute a crime. Then he develops his version. He could have been set up, and Darby, who was a drug dealer, could have been killed by his own accomplices or competitors. Therefore, the jury at the trial will likely side with the man who has lost his entire family due to the imperfections of the system, rather than with the prosecution. However, after all these arguments, Clyde suddenly gets down to business. He says that if Nick makes sure that he is given good conditions in the cell, namely a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress, then in return, he will give a sincere and detailed confession. While Nick is thinking over this strange proposal, the situation suddenly starts escalating. A courier brings a parcel straight to Nick's house. It is a disc with a video recording of Darby's brutal murder. This parcel greatly frightens the prosecutor's wife and 10-year-old daughter. Having learned about this, Nick gets furious. His colleague, a detective Cartala, finally convinces him. In order to get a confession and protect his family, he needs to come to terms with Shelton and give him what he asks for. Nick reluctantly agrees to satisfy Clyde's request for better conditions of detention. Soon, the trial is held, where it is to be decided whether Clyde will remain in custody or not. But here Shelton plays his game again. He doesn't keep his word and doesn't admit the guilt. Instead, he tells the judge that the prosecution doesn't have any solid evidence against him.
This is my first alleged offense, and the prosecution has not presented one single piece of evidence against me.
Therefore, if he is not released on bail, he will regard this as a gross violation of his constitutional rights. To make his words more convincing, Clyde even cites a non-existent judicial precedent, and the lady judge believes his lies and is ready to let him go. But then Clyde makes an unexpected and cynical maneuver. He suddenly begins to rudely insult the judge.
How misguided are you?
He accuses her of unprofessionalism, saying that she easily believes his lies and almost let a man who has confessed to 2 murders go free. Shelton pathetically declares that it is precisely because of such incompetent judges who do not know the laws that hundreds of criminals are released every day.
Whatever happened to the people?
Bail denied.
Whatever
Naturally, the judge gets furious at such rudeness and deception and immediately refuses to grant Clyde bail, and he is sent back to prison. The next day, Clyde, as he has promised earlier, gives Nick that very sincere confession in the case of the murders of Ems and Darby.
Okay, fair enough. That was me, Clyde Shelton, on the video, killing Clarence Darby.
It seems that the case is closed, but when Nick is about to leave, Shelton stops him and offers a new, even stranger deal.
So for lunch, I would love a 20-ounce porterhouse steak. I tell you what, can I have my iPod as well?
First rule in negotiating, Clyde, you gotta have something to bargain with.
Would the life of Bill Reynolds suffice?
He says that if at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a large, juicy steak with a side dish is brought to his cell and music is turned on, he will tell him where to look for Darby's lawyer, Bill Reynolds, who has disappeared 3 days before. With great doubt, Nick decides to fulfill this whim too. However, due to the prison warden's refusal to follow the criminal's lead, he is 8 minutes late in fulfilling the condition. Despite the delay, having received his delicious lunch, Clyde nevertheless gives the coordinates of the place where the lawyer is. Nick immediately sends a helicopter with rescuers to the indicated place. Meaney Meanwhile, in his cell, Clyde Shelton commits another brutal crime. Using a sharpened bone from the very steak that is served to him, he brutally murders his cellmate. After the murder, Clyde is transferred to a solitary confinement cell with extremely harsh conditions. Meanwhile, Nick and his team use the coordinates and find a small cache hidden in the ground. Inside, they see lawyer Bill Reynolds. He's dead, but he has an oxygen mask on his face connected to a small cylinder. But it turns out that the oxygen supply to the mask is programmed, and it stopped exactly at 1:15. Nick realizes all Clyde's calculated cruelty. The helicopter they sent to search for the victim took only 15 minutes to reach this place. This meant that if Nick had followed the terms and delivered the steak at exactly 1 o'clock, they would have had a chance to save the lawyer. Clyde didn't just kill him. He has made Nick realize that his 8-minute delay is the formal cause of Reynolds' death. Upset and depressed, Nick returns to prison to meet Shelton again. He cannot understand the motives for such senseless cruelty and asks him directly,
Well, what principle was at work when you tortured and killed those people?
Clyde's answer is cold and simple.
That everyone must be held accountable for their actions.
In his perverted system of justice, criminals should not just die, but understand their guilt and be punished with the same mercilessness they used to perform their own crime. Then Nick makes a final attempt to reach Clyde's conscience. He returns him a small bracelet made by a child's hand, a touching craft that Clyde's daughter Kazra made especially for her dad. Nick asks the main question.
You think your wife and daughter would feel good about you killing in their name?
But Clyde just answers with icy indifference.
My wife and daughter can't feel anything.
While Nick is trying to talk with Clyde, his assistant, Sarah, is conducting her own investigation. She discovers extremely interesting and strange information about Shelton. It turns out that he owns several invoices paid by the Department of Defense and as many as 9 expensive properties. And what's the most suspicious is that all this property was initially registered in his name and then quickly transferred to some mysterious Panamanian fly-by-nighter corporation. The district attorney, Jonas Scartnella, decides to use his old connections in government circle. Together with Nick, they arrange a secret meeting with a government spy, an undercover agent. The agent reveals a shocking truth. It turns out that Clyde Shelton is not just an unhappy family man seeking revenge for his loved one. He is a natural strategist and a highly skilled specialist who was hired to conduct so-called non-contact operations. This means that he was a master at eliminating any targets quietly, cleanly, and without leaving any evidence. The Department of Defense always turned to him when it was necessary to discreetly and permanently eliminate especially inconvenient and dangerous people.
If Clyde wants you dead, you're dead.
It's worse than we thought.
Now, Nick understands that he is not dealing with an ordinary Avenger, but with a highly intelligent and incredibly dangerous professional who is always 10 steps ahead of everyone. It becomes clear that Clyde Shelton is not just a prisoner. A government spy directly told Nick and prosecutor Jonas that if this man wants to eliminate someone, it is almost impossible to stop him. The only way to protect yourself is to simply shoot him right in the cell without waiting for the trial.
Walk into his cell and put a bullet in his head.
Frightened by this prospect, Nick and Jonas decide to go to the federal judge. They try to persuade her to place Clyde in complete isolation, without any communication with the outside world, explaining that he is 1,000 times more dangerous than he seems at first glance. The judge agrees with their arguments, but she doesn't sign the order as her mobile phone explodes right in her hands.
Hello?
It turns out that the explosive device was planted in it. Nick is shocked by one more death. He returns to prison for a new conversation with Shelton. He tries to reason with him, saying that blind revenge will not resurrect his family and bring him comfort.
And vengeance keeps you warm at night.
However, these words do not calm, but on the contrary, enrage Clyde. He declares with cold malice that this is not revenge, but a real war.
No, I'm at war with this broken thing.
A war that he has declared on the entire broken, unfair, and corrupt justice system that failed him once. Then Clyde gives Nick a new, completely unreal ultimatum.
Release me and drop all charges by 6 a.m.
If his conditions are not met, he will continue to kill. Of course, Nick indignantly refuses to make a deal with the terrorist.
6 a.m., Nick.
Or what?
Or I kill everyone.
Together with his assistant Sarah Lowell, he starts to study the personal files of all the prisoners in the jail. They assume that Clyde must have an accomplice who helps him carry out his plans. But when the working day comes to an end, Nick has to bitterly regret his refusal, as several cars are blown up in the parking lot next to the courthouse, killing 6 employees of the Department of Justice. Among the dead is Sarah Lowell, the very assistant whom Nick values very much and has been preparing to replace him, seeing her as his successor. Later, having searched the perimeter of the prison, the police Police find a radio transmitter near the wall. It is this very transmitter that sent the signal that detonated the bombs planted in the gas tanks of the car. Fearing for the lives of his own wife and daughter, Nick immediately sends them away from the city under the pretext of a vacation. And filled with grief and rage, he returns to prison to see Clyde. There, for the first time, he loses his temper and begins to beat him, demanding that he must immediately stop killing innocent people. But Clyde calmly replies that if 10 years ago Nick had not made a deal with Darby and had done everything possible for a fair trial, it would have been enough for him.
You didn't care, Nick. You didn't even try. You could have walked out of that courtroom with your head held high. I could have lived with that, Nick.
The very fact that the prosecutor fought for the truth to the end would have mattered, but Nick did not. And now Clyde has vowed to completely destroy this rotten and corrupt system to the ground.
This is Von Clausewitz shit. Total fucking war.
After Sarah Lowell's funeral, District Attorney Jonas, surrounded by bodyguards, goes to a press conference dedicated to the memory of the deceased employees. He doesn't suspect that an unknown person is watching him in the neighboring cemetery. Using a portable remote control, he controls a demining robot equipped with an entire arsenal of weapons. The robot first disables all the electronics in the armored cars of the motorcade, and then shoots and blows up Jonas's car. Completely heartbroken by what has happened, Nick submits a letter of resignation to the mayor of the city. However, the mayor named April doesn't accept it and appoints the shocked Nick as the new district attorney instead of the deceased Jonas.
As of now, you're acting district attorney.
After this, the mayor declares an emergency rule in the city, and all forces are thrown into investigating Clyde Shelton's crimes. Unexpectedly, Nick receives a letter from the boyfriend of the deceased Sarah named Chester. He wants to help the investigation, so he sends a list of Clyde's expenses over the past 10 years. It turns out that Shelton has bought many industrial facilities and warehouses. Having analyzed the data, the shocked Nick discovers that one of the huge warehouses belongs personally to Clyde and is located directly opposite the jail. Together with his colleague, Detective Dunnig, he immediately goes to that place. Having thoroughly searched the premises, they find a hidden hatch leading to a long underground tunnel. There, the men discover the real headquarters. There are many sets of various camouflage clothes, detailed plans of government buildings, radio transmitters and monitors broadcasting images from surveillance cameras directly from the jail. And soon, they get the answer to the main mystery. They find several neat tunnels leading straight to different cells of the prison. However, having broken into the punishment cell where Shelton is supposed to be, they find that it is empty. He has escaped. Meanwhile, Clyde, dressed as a cleaner, penetrates the city hall building without any obstacles. He plants a powerful bomb right under the meeting room, where Mayor April is supposed to hold a conference with high-ranking officials. Realizing that Clyde has planned to arrange a mass murder of government officials, Nick and Dunnig immediately rush to the city hall to try to stop him. On the way, Nick asks for police reinforcements, but strictly insists that everyone must act as quietly and unnoticeable as possible so that nothing can frighten or alert Clyde. Having climbed one of the floors, Nick immediately notices a lonely janitor's cart in the corridor. His heart tells him that this is the key. Together with a deminer from the sapper squad, he carefully moves forward and enters an empty conference room. In the center of the room, he sees a suitcase that doesn't belong to anyone. Observing all precautions, the deminer slowly looks inside. His conclusion is terrifying. There is a powerful explosive device, the detonation of which is capable of instantly destroying not only this floor, but also several upper floors, burying everyone in the building under debris. Meanwhile, having done his job, Clyde Shelton returns through his secret tunnel back to his cell. He is absolutely sure that his plan remains a secret, and is very surprised to find Nick in his cell. Despite his hatred, the man recognizes Shelton's intelligence and ingenuity.
You played us, Clyde. You played us real good.
He tries to reach his mind again, persuading him not to detonate the bomb. Nick begs him to understand that by such a senseless and cruel murder of dozens of innocent people, he will forever desecrate and dishonor the bright memory of his own daughter, for whom he has actually started this all.
By murdering all those people, all you're doing is destroying the memory of your daughter and causing the same pain that you're suffering from.
Nick adds that he himself has learned a harsh lesson and swears that he will never make a deal with a criminal again or allow justice to go astray. And if Clyde pulls the trigger now, he will finally face the real consequences of his own actions. But the prosecutor's words can no longer change anything. With a cold grin, Shelton activates the device. At that moment, Nick utters his last words addressed to Clyde.
which I figure by now is about 25 more seconds.
Having said this, he leaves the cell and locks the metal door. At the same moment, his partner, Dunnig, locks and reinforces the exit, tightly sealing the underground passage. Clyde remains in complete bewilderment. He doesn't understand Nick's words until he notices something under his own bunk. There, he finds the very same explosive device from the city hall. He realizes that Nick has outplayed him. The bomb is not in the city hall, but right under his nose. He is caught in his own trap. A powerful, deafening explosion completely destroys the cell. This is how Clyde Shelton dies. Later, the rescuers find one thing in his hand. It is that same small bracelet that his beloved daughter, Khosra, gave him on the day of her death. In the final scene, for the first time in many years, Nick is able to get free from work to come to the concert hall. He sits next to his wife and, with a face glowing with happiness, listens to his daughter's performance. He looks at her, at his family, and a long-awaited, albeit fragile, peace comes to his soul.